And now I have a microphone on so you can hear me better. Morning tea. Apologies for jumping off quickly. That last one, I didn't have a microphone on. How are you today? You can see some mess behind me. I am rearranging my art supplies. Let's see if I can give you a little bit better view. Okay, so I'm going to have some opinions this morning, and I want to say that these are my opinions based on my experience in the world and also my experience in my work. And so please, when you hear me being certain, know that I'm having an opinion. Okay. Okay. So first, a little bit of context. Okay. So BDSM or kink, bondage, domination, dominance, submission, sadism, and masochism are activities and roles and identities that people have that are, kind of like outside the majority of the bell curve of sexuality and sexual behaviors. Though I will tell you, in my experience, everybody has something that they think is a little kinky. Doesn't have to be rooted in shame. And BDSM, kink relationships often have a disparity in power and or authority, right? So one person might be making the decisions. And these are relationships, whether it's just for an hour or for a lifetime, these are relationships that people are in a conversation about, these activities and behaviors. So that's kink. I'm going to call that kink. Ethical non-monogamy is what happens when a pairing, and this is, again, this is just a definition, when a pairing of people, so monogamy would be two people all the time in whatever romantic, erotic, sexual relationship it is. Ethical non-monogamy is what happens when there are more than two. And that can be for anything. It can be for a night, it can be for a lifetime, they can live with you, you can be, whatever. But your ethical non-monogamy is what happens when you're not just with two people. And I will be calling that polyam. Okay, so many, and polyam, we'll get into some other day about why polyam and not poly. So kinky people and polyamorous people, kink and polyam, there is a there's a narrative story. There's a story in these worlds as I've experienced them for the last, I don't know, 30 some years. And by the way, I'm not always active, but I'm in those circles. There's a myth, there's a story that kinky people and polyamorous people are somehow better at relationships because of the conversations they have to have. And I have railed against that because I believe that a good way of relating is a good way of relating regardless of the context of the relationship. So that's one thing. And then uh, if any of you are old enough to remember the HIV crisis in the 1980s, and I remember um, this gay plague and how terrifying and terrible it was to watch so many people I love get sick and die. And I can't speak to the experience of gay men because I am not a gay man. And I want to keep this to my own experience. HIV absolutely changed my behavior. Absolutely. So I've been getting regular STD, STI screening since I was 16. I have not been fluid bonded, and fluid bonding is like when you don't use a condom, gloves, or barriers to inhibit the transfer of bodily fluids from one person to another. I have not been fully fluid bonded for over 20 years because I um, am not willing to take the risk of transmitting an STD or an STI to a partner. So when I'm sexually active, I get regular STD and STI screenings, and I practice behaviors that minimize the risk of transmitting an STD or STI. And in my world, that's normal, it's usual. Kinky people, polyamorous people, um, people who are, at risk for transmitting STDs, STIs, in a sex positive context, the conversation is always happening, always. In my practice, if I'm working with a person or a couple who are looking to expand their horizons into more open, different, kinky, like however, whatever they're looking to bring in, one of the conversations that we have, one of the first conversations that we have is about risk. What is the risk? And some of that has to do with emotional risk. I'm also always thinking about physical risk. So, in an ethically non monogamous context, a couple needs to consider what they're willing to risk. By the way, if you go to a convention and you're married and you have sex with somebody, you're not ethically non-monogamous. You need to have the agreement before. And that happens. People will come to me and say, "Oh, I'm polyamorous because I had an affair." And I'm like, "Well, okay, so you might be non-monogamous, but you're not ethical in that." And then I hear things like, "Well, they were married, so we didn't need to use a condom or a barrier. And I'm on the pill, so I'm not going to get pregnant." And I think, whoa, friend. Whoa, 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 friend. There are other things at play here. Like you have an ethical responsibility to tell your partner. So, with regards to COVID, bringing this back, and coming from my own personal experience and my experience in the BDSM world and the non-monogamous world, and my experience as a teacher and my experience working with people directly, COVID, I believe, is going to force all of us to be in these conversations about risk. So, leaving quarantining out of it, leaving, if you're thinking about lockdown out of it, leaving all of that out of it, we are, we, humanity, is going to have to be in a conversation about risk. And the risk isn't only what am I willing to risk personally. It's what am I willing to risk for the people I love, for my family, for my community, for people I don't even know. And my sense is these kinds of ideas, these kinds of considerations are so outside the norm that they're butting up against the resistance. This is my sense, the resistance to masks, the resistance to physical distance, I think, is somehow rooted in never having had to consider really what are my behaviors doing that could harm another person just by me being. And now speaking to my experience as living in the United States, we pathologize illness. We make people wrong. What is it, like 2/3 of adults have herpes or some form, and it's like, oh my God, this is terrible. They're dirty. No, they have herpes. It's something to consider. So I'm trying to be patient as people are adjusting and railing against this um, like required new conversation. I am. And I think that my railing against this idea that kinky and non-monogamous people are better at relating, uh, I might have to shift it a little bit because we're already in the conversation. I had a conversation this week with a person who practices non-monogamy who shared that they had to have the whole conversation with their parents about being one household in two locations. Um, the New Zealand equivalent, they're calling it bubbles, like you pick your bubble. And I think those are the conversations we're going to be in, we're going to start having. And then, trust becomes very different because it's not just what am I willing to risk for myself, what am I willing to risk for the people here. It's, do I trust this person when they tell me they're going to operate in this behavior set? Will they do that? And that's vulnerable. There's a vulnerability there. Um, yeah. So the the practice of having a conversation about what's going to happen before it happens, the practice of being in a dialogue while whatever the it is happening, the process of reflecting internally, what am I personally willing to risk? This is new stuff for a lot of people, a lot of people. And while I'm personally, I have a very conservative risk profile, I recognize that not everybody does. So I had some thoughts this morning. I wish you well. I hope that whatever dialogue conversations you're in are going well. And just know that, if these are new ideas, if the idea of um, not only personal risk, but risk to others in a way that like you can't see it, and it's also not immediate. Just know that, if you're having a little bit of dissonance, a little bit of cognitive dissonance around that, you're not alone. You're not. And as we figure out what the middle path is between never leave the house and, you know, big giant party, no matter what, um, yeah, we're just going to have to be talking and being in a dialogue. And you might want to reach out to some of your kinky friends because they could have some techniques, strategies, and otherwise that could help you. Okay, bye.